Today, we're tracing one of the most important arcs in modern history: how imperial expansion in Asia started from Korea and Manchuria, eventually led to the Pacific War, the occupation of the Philippines, and the final collapse of Japan in 1945. But more than that, we'll connect it to something even bigger: how these events shaped today's global security system, alliances, and foreign policy logic. Let's begin. To understand the Pacific War, we need to start earlier than 1941. Korea, 1910. Japan formally annexed Korea in 1910. Korea became a colonial labor source, a military manpower reserve, and a strategic buffer zone. This marked Japan's transformation into a modern imperial power. Manchuria in 1931. In 1931, Japan invaded Manchuria in China and created a puppet state called Manchukuo. Why Manchuria? Because Manchuria is rich in coal and iron. Manchuria is perfect for industrial expansion, and it became a military staging ground. This was the beginning of Japan's full-scale continental expansion. Now let's talk about the Chinese War in 1937. The conflict escalated into the Second Sino-Japanese War. By this point, Japan was overextended, resource-hungry, and dependent on expansion to survive economically. And this sets the stage for global war. By December 7 to December 8, 1941, Japan attacked the United States at the attack on Pearl Harbor. Why? To eliminate the US's Pacific power, to secure Southeast Asia unopposed, and to protect expansion routes. The Philippines, then a US territory, became an immediate battlefield. In 1942, the Bataan and Corregidor fell. American and Filipino forces under Douglas MacArthur Jr. retreated to defensive position. And in 1942, in January to April, the Battle of Bataan began. This is to prolong the defense, despite of severe shortages, and ended in April 9, 1942. The result? Filipino surrender in the infamous Bataan Death March. Let's talk about the Battle of Corregidor. The last Allied stronghold fell on May 6, 1942. This marks the full occupation of Japan to the Philippines. In 1942 to 1945, Japan established a military rule, later forming a puppet government, which led President Jose P. Laurel and the Second Philippine Republic in 1943. The key features: the strict military control, or Kempeitai, forced labor and food requisition, and the propaganda of Asia for Asians. But beneath occupation, resistance was rising. Across the Philippines, resistance movements formed using guerrilla warfare. The most notable, the Hukbalahap, led by Luis Taruk. They conducted guerrilla warfare, ambushed Japanese forces, protected rural communities, and gathered intelligence for the Allies. This was a shadow war inside occupied territory. The turning point: the return of MacArthur. In 1944, MacArthur returned to the Philippines, landed in Leyte, fulfilling his famous promise, "I shall return." His strategy was not traditional warfare. Key strategies: island hopping, or skipping the strongholds. Target strategic islands only to isolate the Japanese forces and to cut supply chains. This made Japanese positions slowly collapse without direct confrontation. Now the war becomes global compression as the global endgame begins in 1945. The Soviet entry at the Yalta Conference, as Allies agreed that USSR would enter the war against Japan. In 1945 of August, USSR invades Manchuria. Japanese army collapses in mainland Asia. Let's talk about the atomic bombs. The United States dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima in August 6, 1942, and in the bombing of Nagasaki in August 9, 1945. This introduced a new reality: the total destruction in seconds and psychological collapse of Japanese leadership. By August 1945, Japan faced loss of Southeast Asia resources, naval blockade, destruction of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Soviet invasion in Manchuria, and atomic bombings. This combination created strategic paralysis, economic collapse, and political surrender. Japan formally surrendered to the United States in August 1945. Now let's step back as diplomats and analysts. The birth of modern international order. World War II led directly to United Nations system, collective security principle, and prohibition of aggressive warfare. Number two, U.S. as Pacific power. The Philippines Campaign and Pacific War established that U.S. military dominance is prevalent in the Asian Pacific. The U.S. military dominance in Asia Pacific and long-term alliance structure later became the ASEAN-US relations. Number three, Soviet entry was the beginning of the Cold War structure. USSR's move to Manchuria and Korea influenced the post-war division of Korea and shaped the Cold War in Asia. Let's talk about number four, nuclear diplomacy begins. Atomic bombs introduce deterrence theory, nuclear diplomacy, and the balance of terror logic still present today. Number five, Philippines in modern foreign affairs. The Philippines becomes a U.S. treaty ally, a strategic Indo-Pacific location, and the keynote in regional security architecture. If we compressed everything, here's our key takeaway. Japan's expansion from Korea to Manchuria to China to Southeast Asia, leading towards the Pacific War. The Allies' response: containment, island hopping, Soviet entry, later the atomic bombs. The outcome: Japanese empire collapse, the rise of US-led international order, and the foundation of modern Indo-Pacific geopolitics. So when we study the Bataan, Corregidor, MacArthur, guerrillas, Hiroshima, and Nagasaki, we are not just studying war. We are studying the architecture of today's world order: alliances, deterrence, sovereignty, and the power balance in Asia Pacific. If you found this helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next deep dive.